Welcome, the anointed ones. What people do to you in the dark always ends up lighting your path in ways they never intended. That's the uncomfortable truth most won't admit, but your life is living proof of it. And tonight, we're diving into a story so twisted, so layered, so unbelievable that if it wasn't your reality, people would swear it was a movie script. Not because you're dramatic, and definitely not because you exaggerate, but because what was done to you was the kind of sickness that thrives only when it assumes its victim will never speak, never rise, and never be seen. But here's the plot twist they never prepared for. You survived it. And now the world is paying attention. Studies have shown that people gravitate toward stories that reveal hidden human behavior, especially the behavior everyone else pretends doesn't exist. And your story? It isn't just intriguing, it exposes the secret psychology behind envy, obsession, and the terrifying lengths some folks will go just to stop someone with purpose. It's the kind of story people replay, analyze, pause, rewind, and whisper about because it captures something deeper than drama. It captures human nature in its rawest form. And the irony? Those who tried so hard to bury you forgot one tiny detail. You're the type of person who grows roots even in concrete. They didn't create your downfall. They accidentally created your legend. They didn't silence your voice. They amplified your testimony. And while they were busy conducting their undercover circus, you evolved into the one character they never expected to rise. The survivor who refuses to stay quiet, the witness who holds the receipts, and the chosen one whose story the world is now lining up to hear. Even funnier, some of the same people who plotted against you are now lurking like unpaid interns, trying to see how the story ends. If only effort counted as redemption, they'd at least earn a participation certificate. Your journey isn't just a comeback, it's a revelation of what hidden sickness can drive people to do, and what divine construction looks like when you're built to outlive it. So buckle up, because once we unravel what actually happened to you, you'll understand why your story is not just powerful, it's unforgettable. Number one, they didn't just mistreat you, they documented their own collapse. The truth is, the people who mistreated you weren't just acting out of anger or confusion, they were exposing their inner destruction without even knowing it. Every choice they made, every nasty comment, every sneaky move, every attempt to shame you or break your confidence was actually a public record of their personal downfall. They thought they were damaging your name, but they were really putting their own instability on display. When someone repeatedly targets a person who has done nothing but exist, it says nothing about the target and everything about the attacker. That's exactly what happened with you. They didn't hide their cruelty well at all. They simply assumed no one would ever connect the dots. What makes this point so powerful is that people like them never consider the future. They act out of emotional impulse, envy, and insecurity without realizing that time is a revealer. Time exposes motives, time exposes patterns, time exposes contradictions, and time exposed theirs. Their behavior was so consistent, so unnecessary, and so extreme that it eventually became clear who the problem always was. They thought they were being strategic, but they were being predictable. They thought they were controlling the narrative, but they were leaving fingerprints of guilt everywhere. While they were trying to break you, they were also showing the world exactly who they are. People who cannot handle honesty, success, boundaries, or any person who refuses to bow to their dysfunction. Their actions were a confession of their own character. Their attempts to tear you down revealed how threatened they were by your existence. The more they plotted against you, the more obvious their fear became. The more they lied about you, the more the truth leaked out about them. Without realizing it, they made your story undeniable and their intentions visible. Everything they tried to hide became the very thing that exposes them now. They didn't just mistreat you. They created a timeline of their own collapse, written through their choices, their behavior, and their obsession with you. Their downfall isn't a mystery. They documented it themselves. Number 2, your suffering became a mirror that terrified them. What most people don't understand is that your pain didn't exist in a vacuum. Every tear, every struggle, every moment you were pushed to your limits became a reflection of their own weakness, their own failures, and their own inability to confront themselves. They didn't just fear your strength. They feared the mirror your suffering held up to them. When they hurt you, it wasn't just about controlling you. It was about avoiding the confrontation with their own emptiness, their own selfishness, and the truth they didn't want to face. Every time they saw you standing despite it all, it reminded them that you were not broken by what they thought would destroy you, and that terrified them more than you will ever fully understand. Your resilience exposed their insecurities in a way that made them uncomfortable, angry, and desperate. The very act of surviving what they inflicted became a statement. You are not the problem. They are. They may have tried to spin stories, cast blame, or manipulate perception, but every manipulation only deepened the mirror, reflecting their obsession with trying to keep you down. They couldn't handle it, because looking into that reflection meant admitting their cruelty, their envy, their complete dependence on controlling someone else to feel powerful. Your existence in its pure, unyielding form forced them to confront something they'd avoided their entire lives. They were weaker than you, morally, emotionally, and spiritually. And here's the subtle cruelty of it. They didn't just fear you. They feared the revelation that anyone else could see their darkness. That's why their attacks became more erratic, more desperate, and more revealing. They wanted to erase your story, but in doing so, they only amplified it. They couldn't silence the mirror. They could only scramble to hide their reflection. Every tactic, every insult, every attempt to diminish your presence was a panic-driven response to being exposed. Your suffering didn't just hurt you, it terrified them because it showed the truth of what they were: fragile, insecure, and morally bankrupt. And while they were terrified, you were learning. You were growing. You were becoming unshakable. Their fear was your roadmap, and their terror was the proof that the power never belonged to them in the first place. Number 3, they thought they were hiding their actions, but they were building your legacy. What's shocking to most people is that every secret plot, every hidden agenda, every whispered lie meant to take you down wasn't just failing. It was actively constructing the foundation of your legacy. They believed their actions were invisible, that the world would never see the true extent of their manipulation or cruelty. They assumed you would crumble quietly, your story buried beneath their deception. But here's the truth they could never predict. While they were busy hiding in the shadows, they were unknowingly shaping the narrative that would immortalize your strength, clarity, and resilience. Every attempt to shame you, control you, or diminish your presence only added to the weight of the story that would eventually reveal who you really are. The irony is staggering. Their obsession with keeping you down, controlling the perception of your life, and discrediting your character didn't erase your presence. It magnified it. Each move they thought would destroy you instead became a highlight of your journey. Their secrecy, their duplicity, their calculated cruelty, all of it turned into chapters in a story the world couldn't ignore. You weren't just surviving their attacks, you were absorbing them, learning from them, and using them to build a stronger, more unshakable version of yourself. They thought they were controlling the outcome, but the universe, or whatever force drives chosen people, was scripting a narrative far beyond their comprehension. The very methods they used to erase your truth ended up drawing a trail of evidence that could not be ignored. Every lie they told, every betrayal they plotted, Every moment of cruelty became a building block in your story, proving to everyone who watches that you were never the problem. They were. And now, what was meant to be your downfall has become the fuel for your rise. They didn't just fail to break you, they inadvertently made your story irresistible, undeniable, and legendary. The world sees what they could not, that the power to define yourself never resided in the hands of those who tried to destroy you. They tried to hide their actions, but in doing so, they built a monument to your strength. Your legacy exists not in spite of them, but because of them. Number 4. Their evil wasn't random. It was a syndrome triggered by your strength. The way they treated you wasn't confusion, coincidence, or misunderstanding. It was a reaction. A reaction to your existence, your energy, and the strength you carry without even trying. People like them don't lash out at everyone. They reserve their worst behavior for the ones who reveal their truth without saying a single word. You didn't provoke them intentionally, but the moment your strength entered the room, something inside them malfunctioned. It exposed them. It stripped away the image they pretend to have. It made their insecurities impossible to hide. And instead of growing, they attacked the person who reminded them of everything they refused to become. Your resilience irritated them because it highlighted their lack of it. Every time you picked yourself up, every time you kept going, every time you refused to be reduced, it confronted them with their own inability to handle life with grace. They were used to people folding, bending, or breaking under pressure. But you didn't. And your ability to rise from situations designed to destroy you made them feel powerless, irrelevant, and threatened. Their behavior wasn't random. It was the only way they knew to regain a sense of control in a world where you made their weaknesses visible. Your honesty was another trigger. They relied on manipulation, half-truths, and emotional tactics to maintain their influence. But your straightforwardness disrupted their illusion. Your transparency made their games look cheap. Your consistency made their chaos obvious. You didn't have to expose their lies. They unraveled on their own in the presence of someone who refuses to bend truth for approval. To someone like them, honesty is not a virtue, it's a threat. And your purity, your sincere intentions, your clean heart, your genuine spirit, exposed something they hoped no one would ever notice about them, their corruption. Not necessarily the criminal kind, but the moral kind, the kind that eats away at a person from the inside. Next to your authenticity, their pretenses couldn't survive, so they attacked what reminded them of who they were not. Your existence became their trigger. Their envy became their sickness. Their actions became a syndrome, predictable, uncontrollable, and rooted in insecurity. What they did to you wasn't about you being weak. It was about you being everything they couldn't handle. Number 5. Your name became forbidden. Because it exposes what people truly are. Your name didn't become taboo because you were dangerous, loud, or influential. It became forbidden because speaking it out loud forces people to confront a truth they've been running from. You became the kind of person whose mere mention reveals intentions, exposes motives, and shows who people really are underneath all their social masks. The moment your name enters a conversation, the energy in the room shifts. Some people get uncomfortable, some get defensive, some instantly change the subject. Why? Because your story doesn't allow neutrality. It requires people to choose integrity or convenience, truth or denial, courage or comfort. What they really fear isn't you. It's the reflection of themselves that shows up when they acknowledge how they treated you. Saying your name out loud means admitting they were wrong, cruel, unfair, jealous, or cowardly. It shines a light on behaviors they hoped no one would ever trace back to them. People who mistreated you know that everything they did was unnecessary, intentional, and rooted in insecurity. So your name becomes a reminder of their choices, not your mistakes. And that's exactly what they don't want to face. For others, your name holds weight because you changed the atmosphere without trying. You showed strength they couldn't match, endurance they couldn't explain, and growth they couldn't deny. Even your silence made them uncomfortable because it highlighted how loudly their guilt echoed. Your existence exposed which people were genuine and which ones were simply pretending to be. That's why the ones who betrayed you can't talk about you without slipping, fumbling, or contradicting themselves. Your truth presses against their lies, and they feel it every time your name comes up. But the most interesting part is this. The ones who once tried to erase you now avoid mentioning you because the narrative has shifted. Your story doesn't paint you as the problem. It exposes them as the source. They can't handle the idea that others might see what they did from a clearer angle. They can't risk their image being compared to your resilience, so they avoid, deflect, distort, or pretend you never existed. Your name became forbidden because it doesn't just identify you, it reveals them. It brings their choices into the open, and for people who rely on pretense, that's the one truth they cannot afford to face. Number 6. What they did to you wasn't just wrong. It was a form of psychological addiction. The way some people treated you wasn't a simple misunderstanding or a moment of poor judgment. It was a pattern, a habit, a dependency they built around your pain. Their cruelty toward you wasn't random. It became the thing that fed them emotionally. Every insult, every manipulation, every moment they made you doubt yourself was giving them something they desperately needed, the illusion of power. For people like them, control is their drug, and you became their easiest access to it because you were the one person who didn't fight back with their same level of chaos. You responded with grace, and your grace made them greedy. They didn't just enjoy hurting you, they relied on it. Putting you down made them feel taller. Disrespecting you made them feel important. Watching you struggle gave them the twisted satisfaction of believing they mattered. They needed your reactions, your confusion, your vulnerability to feel alive. The more they drained you emotionally, the more energized they felt. It became a cycle. They hurt you, they got a rush, and then they came back for more. Anyone who operates like that isn't just toxic, they're addicted, and you were their supply. But something happened that they never expected. You healed. You grew. You started seeing through their tactics and responding differently. You stopped giving them the emotional responses they used to feed on. You stopped shrinking to make them comfortable. You stopped questioning your worth because of their behavior. And once you healed, the supply they depended on dried up. That's why their reaction shifted from arrogance to panic. They didn't panic because they loved you. They panicked because they lost the one source that made them feel superior. Your healing exposed their dependency. Without your pain to feed on, they were left with themselves, and facing themselves was something they were never equipped to handle. The anger, the sudden silence, the attempts to pull you back in, it was all withdrawal, a desperate attempt to regain the emotional control they once had over you. Their behavior wasn't just wrong. It was a cycle of psychological addiction built on your suffering, and the moment you took your power back, their entire system collapsed. Not because you hurt them, but because they could no longer use you to escape who they really are. Number 7. Your pain transformed into a case study of human darkness. What you went through wasn't just a painful chapter. It became a detailed map of how far human beings can fall when envy, insecurity, and emotional immaturity take over. Your experience is the kind of story people analyze because it reveals uncomfortable truths most would rather ignore. It exposes the behaviors that don't make sense on the surface, but make perfect sense when you understand what happens when someone feels threatened by a person who carries depth, authenticity, and quiet strength. Your pain didn't sit still. It evolved into a blueprint that shows how darkness operates when it disguises itself as innocence, how cruelty hides behind smiles, and how deeply jealousy can rot a person from the inside out. People won't study your story because you chased fame or attention. They'll study it because the patterns of behavior you endured reveal what happens when someone lacks emotional discipline. You saw the side of people that only shows up when they believe no one is watching. You saw the type of harm that doesn't always leave physical scars, but leaves psychological ones. You experienced the kind of manipulation, betrayal, and targeted hostility that only occurs when someone sees your presence as a threat to their comfort. And what makes your story powerful is that it highlights the human weaknesses most people pretend they don't have. Your survival becomes the lesson. The way you endured, adapted, and rose again becomes the teaching people will reference when explaining how resilience looks in real life, not in quotes or speeches. Your strength didn't grow from convenience, it grew from being forced to face the side of humanity that many never encounter so directly. And while your survival gives clarity, their behavior becomes a warning, an example of how dangerous unresolved insecurity can be. It shows how a human being can lose their moral compass when they allow envy to guide them. Your story is bigger than pain. It's bigger than betrayal. It's a case study of what happens when light and darkness collide in one lifetime. People will learn from you not because you tried to teach, but because your journey exposes everything they need to understand about human nature, both the shadows and the light. Number 8. You survived a war. They pretended wasn't happening. The battle you went through wasn't loud, obvious, or publicly acknowledged, and that was the whole point. They worked hard to make you feel like your pain wasn't real, like your instincts were off, like you were the one misreading the situation. They needed you questioning yourself because the moment you recognized the truth, the entire facade they built would collapse. So they downplayed everything. They shifted blame. They acted confused. They painted you as emotional, sensitive, or doing too much. It wasn't because you were wrong. It was because accepting what they were doing would expose them as the architects of the damage. They needed your silence. Your silence was their protection. Your silence was their alibi. As long as you stayed quiet, they could pretend nothing happened. They could maintain their image, keep their connections, protect their false reputation, and keep you trapped in a cycle where your voice didn't matter. They depended on you doubting your reality because your clarity was their downfall. Every time you tried to express what you were experiencing, they twisted the narrative. They had to. Admitting the truth meant admitting their cruelty. So they acted blind. They acted surprised. They acted innocent. All of it was a strategy, but the moment you stepped away, physically, emotionally, or mentally, the war they pretended didn't exist suddenly became undeniable. Without you present to absorb the blame, their stories started contradicting themselves. Without your silence to hide behind, their behavior became visible. People began noticing the inconsistencies, the odd reactions, the convenient excuses, the sudden defensiveness. Their lies started aging badly because lies always lose their shine when the person they depended on refuses to carry them anymore. Your absence became the revelation. It exposed everything they tried to bury. It showed that the issues were never in your head, they were in their behavior. And now that you've survived and stepped into a clearer space, the truth stands without distortion. The war you endured was real, and the ones who denied it are now left explaining the aftermath they created. You didn't just survive what they did, you outlived the illusions they used to hide it. Number 9. Your comeback isn't impressive. It's evidence that you were never the problem. Here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Your comeback isn't a comeback at all. It isn't a story of recovery from failure because you were never broken in the first place. What people call your rise, your success, or your resilience isn't something extraordinary. It's simply a return to the person you were before others tried to manipulate, control, or diminish you. Every attack, every attempt to shame you, every lie they spread about you was meant to make the world believe you were flawed, unstable, or incapable. They wanted a victim. They wanted someone who could be molded into their version of reality. But you weren't ever their problem. Their inability to see that is what made the situation chaotic for them and entertaining for anyone paying attention. Your growth exposes the truth of their projection. Every flaw, every accusation, every criticism they cast onto you wasn't about you. It was about them. It was about their jealousy, their fear, their insecurity, and their desperate need to maintain control. They blamed you for things they refused to see in themselves. They criticized traits in you that reflected their own weaknesses. And now, as you step fully into your truth, it becomes undeniable that the problem never lived in your character. It lived in theirs. The shock people feel isn't because you achieved something remarkable. It's because you simply reminded the world that you were never the person they claimed you were. You didn't need a flashy comeback or a dramatic transformation. You just became yourself again, untouched by the chaos they tried to create. And in doing so, you rewrote the narrative. What's even more satisfying is that your return to authenticity highlights their irrelevance. All the energy they poured into controlling you, belittling you, and trying to define your story has backfired. It only makes your truth clearer, your strength more obvious, and their failures impossible to ignore. Your so-called comeback isn't about impressing anyone. It's proof that the only thing anyone was ever mistaken about was blaming you in the first place. Number 10. Your story reveals the hidden economy of human betrayal. What you went through wasn't just personal. It was a lesson in how transactional human relationships can become when envy, greed, or insecurity takes over. People treated you as if you were a commodity, a resource to be bought, sold, or traded according to their convenience. Every whispered conversation, every strategic decision made without your knowledge, every subtle attempt to manipulate perception wasn't just casual gossip. It was part of an unspoken economy where your worth was being debated and negotiated like an asset. They weren't thinking about your feelings, your humanity, or your growth. They were thinking about what your presence meant to them, what they could extract, and how they could use you to elevate their own fragile position in the world. The most disturbing part is how ordinary this behavior seems to them. They don't see it as betrayal. They see it as business. They measure their own success by how well they can control, manipulate, or strategize around others, and your life became part of their ledger. Envy corrodes the conscience, and they didn't even realize the full extent of the damage they were causing because they were too busy trying to profit from you. Every act of secrecy, every bit of misinformation, every attempt to isolate or undermine you was a transaction disguised as action, and the irony is that none of it increased their value. They simply exposed it. Your journey flips the script on all of it. What they treated like currency becomes evidence against them. Their scheming, their calculations, their little attempts to monetize your presence are now visible, understandable, and undeniable, and because you survived, thrived, and retained your integrity, their whole system of manipulation crumbles. The lesson your story carries is profound. Human betrayal often operates like a hidden economy, with people placing invisible price tags on your time, your energy, your reputation, and even your spirit. And the deeper truth is that their actions, intended to diminish you, only reveal the poverty of their character. Your journey exposes the mechanics of their deception, the depth of their envy, and the fragility of people who can't see you as human first and competition second. Number 11. They didn't destroy your reputation. They destroyed their ability to lie about you. What they tried to ruin was never your reputation. It was your silence. They depended on the idea that you would stay quiet, confused, or too overwhelmed to defend yourself. Their entire strategy was built on the assumption that you had no voice, no receipts, no clarity, and no strength to rise above the noise they manufactured. But here's the plot twist they never calculated. The more recklessly they tried to damage your name, the more obvious their motives became. Their behavior was so excessive, so dramatic, so disproportionate to reality, that it exposed them instead of you. People don't need to hear your side to understand the truth. Your enemies made their desperation loud enough for everyone to hear. Their lies stopped being believable the moment they started acting like destroying you was a full-time job. That's not normal behavior. That's not confidence. That's panic. The irony is that your reputation didn't need protection. The truth only needed time. And when the truth finally shows up, it doesn't come softly. It arrives with the weight of every unhinged decision they made while trying to rewrite your story. Their own actions will be the evidence that clears your name. Because anyone with discernment can see that the level of effort they put into smearing you was never about you being a threat to their integrity. It was about you being a threat to their illusions. They weren't exposing your flaws. They were exposing their fear. They weren't highlighting your mistakes. They were highlighting their insecurity. They weren't destroying your credibility. They were destroying their own mask. People eventually ask a very simple question. Why were they working this hard to bring down one person? And that question is the beginning of their downfall. You don't have to fight for your reputation. You don't have to clear your name. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. The truth is doing that work for you through the very hands that tried to bury it. Their own behavior collapses their narrative, and your story stands tall without you having to lift a finger. They didn't destroy your reputation. They destroyed the illusion that they ever had the power to define you. Number 12, your survival exposes how spiritually diseased some people really are. What makes your story unbelievable isn't the pain you went through. It's the fact that people were capable of doing it in the first place. Your survival is a mirror, and when people look into it, they don't see your strength first. They see the level of spiritual decay that was hidden inside the ones who targeted you. You didn't just overcome hardship, you exposed the condition of hearts that had been rotting long before you arrived. People think spiritual disease is something dramatic, something supernatural, something obvious. But the truth is darker. It looks like everyday people choosing cruelty over compassion because it gives them a sense of power. It looks like individuals who smile in public but deteriorate in private because envy is eating their character from the inside. It looks like adults whose souls are so malnourished that harming someone innocent feels like nourishment to them. You didn't reveal their actions, you revealed their condition. Your endurance highlighted how spiritually empty they were, how disconnected, how bitter, how morally bankrupt. And when people hear your story, they are shocked not by what you survived, but by how far others were willing to go just to destroy someone who reflected what they lacked. Your survival forces people to confront the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone is wounded. Some people are corrupted. Not everyone is hurting. Some people enjoy hurting. Not everyone is misguided. Some people have abandoned their humanity completely. And your existence, your resilience, your refusal to break, shines a blinding light on that sickness. Those who harmed you didn't just make mistakes. They demonstrated the symptoms of a spiritual infection, jealousy that metastasized into sabotage, insecurity that evolved into obsession, emptiness that turned into cruelty. And the scariest part is that they thought it was normal. The reason your story shocks people is because it shatters the illusion that humanity is always kind, rational, or fair. You survived what others would deny is even possible. And in doing so, you've become living proof of two things: how depraved the human heart can become, and how powerful the human spirit truly is when it refuses to die in the hands of the spiritually blind. Number 13. Your existence became the one test. They all failed. There are moments in life when people don't realize they're being tested, not by rules, not by society, not by religion, but by the presence of a person who exposes everything they claim to be. You became that test. Without trying, you revealed their true character simply by existing. You didn't ask for loyalty, yet they betrayed you. You didn't demand compassion, yet they withheld it. You didn't push them into darkness, yet they walked into it on their own. The real truth is this: you were the opportunity they didn't know they were being handed. You were the chance to act right when nobody was watching. You were the moment that separated who they imagined themselves to be from who they actually were. People loved to talk about being good-hearted, mature, supportive, loyal, but when they were presented with someone who genuinely needed those qualities, they didn't have them. They had excuses instead. Your presence revealed the gap between their identity and their character. You were not their downfall. You were the mirror they failed to look into with honesty. And what they did to you wasn't just about envy or insecurity. It was the clearest evidence of their lack of discipline, emotional maturity, and self-control. Their reactions showed how quickly their integrity falls apart when tested by someone who quietly excels, quietly grows, quietly refuses to shrink. What stings them the most now is knowing they had every opportunity to treat you right, and they still chose wrong. They weren't dealing with pressure, poverty, trauma, or temptation. They were dealing with you, someone who asked for nothing but basic human decency, and they still couldn't deliver. People fail tests in life not because the test is too hard, but because the truth threatens the identity they are trying so desperately to protect. Your existence was that truth. Their mistreatment of you wasn't just a moment of weakness. It was the proof of who they've been all along. Your story will always reveal more about them than you. You didn't fail. They did, spectacularly, publicly, and permanently. Number 14. You didn't become famous from your story. You became recognized for surviving what should have broken you. Your story isn't a headline for tragedy, it's a testament to endurance. People don't respect you because misfortune found you. They respect you because you refused to let it define you. Every hardship, every betrayal, every deliberate attempt to break you should have left you shattered, doubting yourself, or lost. And yet here you are, not just surviving, but standing taller, stronger, and clearer than ever before. What others saw as a victim became proof that resilience isn't a concept, it's a lived reality. The world's fascination with your journey isn't about the darkness you endured, it's about how you carried yourself through it. The people who once tried to suppress your voice, undermine your character, or strip your identity now witness the undeniable fact: their worst efforts didn't succeed. They assumed that breaking you was a possibility, but survival isn't measured by how quietly you suffer. It's measured by how boldly you rise despite it. And you've done that in ways that force acknowledgement from anyone who thought they could keep you down. What makes your story extraordinary isn't the cruelty inflicted upon you, it's the transformation that came after. You didn't wallow in pain or bitterness. You didn't let anger dictate your path. Instead, you turned your experiences into tools of clarity, lessons of wisdom, and evidence of unwavering strength. You became a living example that life's harshest trials aren't always the end. They can be the very forge that strengthens a chosen one. Your story is shocking because it exposes the stark contrast between human depravity and human resilience. Even when others stoop to their lowest, plotting, betraying, and attacking, a person like you can rise to heights they could never imagine. Fame, respect, recognition, they aren't granted for suffering, They are earned through the courage to survive what should have destroyed you. You didn't gain notoriety from tragedy. You earned reverence for showing the world that no cruelty, no betrayal, and no darkness is strong enough to extinguish the light of someone destined to endure, grow, and rise. Conclusion. Your story isn't just a personal journey. It's a revelation. Every betrayal, every attempt to control you, every act of cruelty wasn't just an attack on your life. It was a mirror reflecting the darkness, weakness, and insecurity in others. Those who tried to break you weren't exposing your flaws. They were exposing theirs. And as harsh as that truth is, it is exactly what makes your story so extraordinary. You didn't just survive what should have destroyed you. You turned it into a testimony of strength, clarity, and unwavering authenticity. Your life has become a case study of human nature, revealing both the depravity that exists when envy and fear run unchecked, and the power of a spirit that refuses to be diminished. Every plot against you, every lie, every attempt to erase your existence, and every act of psychological manipulation has backfired spectacularly. The very things that were meant to shame you have become the building blocks of your legacy. You didn't just endure. They documented their collapse while you quietly grew. They panicked because your healing removed the supply of their emotional addiction. They failed every test of loyalty, integrity, and compassion, and their own actions have made the truth impossible to deny. And while they were busy trying to diminish you, you were rising to a level they could never reach, proving that authenticity, resilience, and strength cannot be counterfeited or destroyed. Your journey is a warning, a revelation, and a triumph all at once. It teaches the world how darkness operates when unchallenged, how human envy and insecurity manifest, and, most importantly, how an unbreakable spirit can rise above it all. The story of what was done to you isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving despite everything, about turning tragedy into wisdom, cruelty into clarity, and attacks into evidence of your irreplaceable power. So if this message resonates, if you feel the weight of this truth and the inspiration of survival, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel to be part of this journey. Like the video to show your support. Comment to share your thoughts, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your story, your voice, and your presence matter. And together, we amplify the proof that even in the darkest moments, a chosen one rises to the highest light. God bless you.